So my name is Emanuela. I am a Connecticut native. I grew up in Norwalk, Connecticut. I went to high school in Bridgeport. I ended up in New Haven through college at University of New Haven. I moved away for a little bit, but came back and settled here about 7 years ago now. My family is from Haiti, Haitian American. My parents immigrated to Connecticut. My dad in the 70s, my mom in the 80s. And so, as Karen said, travel is one thing everybody knows I'm addicted to. It's an expensive hobby of mine. And so I've been struggling on what stories to tell you guys. I have so many. But I bring up Haiti because that's home for me and I love going back. Every few years or so, we take a trip as a family. And we just took our last one in July. We were there for 2 weeks. And usually when we go to Haiti, we fly into the capital, Port-au-Prince, and then we rent a few cars depending on how many of us there are. And then we take a long road up to my grandma's house. It's an 8-hour drive through the country, up a mountain, over to grandma's house we go, and it really is a journey. And this past trip was my first time going in summer, and do not ever go to the Caribbean in the summer. It was the worst decision of my life. I don't know why I planned a trip for then. But so the days were so hot, so we mainly stayed inside or in the compound during the day, and at night we would go out and explore. So on this one night, my mom, my aunt, an uncle, and a bunch of us, the Americans as they call us, went out for a walk. And so we were walking past my grandma's house, which I've never done before. I had no idea how vast the area spread. So we're walking, and my aunt at one point said, "Oh, this is the compound, or this is the lot that we grew up on." My mom and her siblings are 12. It was 12 of them that grew up, and they grew up on this lot. And so we kept walking past it. They were like, "Oh, well, this is our grandmother's lot here." And so it's like, "Oh, well, let's go look." And so we walked into the lot, and it was just, there was no house, there was nothing there anymore, except for this one tree. And it was like a big, majestic, beautiful tree. It was just like standing so just boldly. And so it was just so picture perfect for Instagram, Facebook. So we're like, let's take pictures. So we're taking pictures. And everybody kind of turned around to leave and continue the walk. And I don't know what drew me to the tree, but I was so obsessed with this tree. So I went to the tree and I was touching it, and I kind of just closed my eyes and I was looking past it, and it was at the top of a very big hill. And so we look out and you can see miles of land, and you see lots of mountains in the back. And I'm like, man, this is great. And I started thinking about my great grandmother who lived there and raised 16 kids on this lot. And I had just learned her name, I think earlier that day or maybe the day before. Her name was Saint Rose. And I was like, man, I wonder what Saint Rose used to sit here and think about, and what dreams she had, what prayers she had on this lot looking out. I wondered if she thought her descendants would ever live in America or have electricity 24/7, or went to college and have degrees, or myself worked in political campaigns, worked for the first Black president of the United States. Like, I was like, she might be so proud of us right now. I wish I could ask her. The one thing that really sat with me and resonated with me was the fact that at this tree, she might have been standing at this tree in the late 1800s or early 1900s, and looking out into this land. It struck me that she probably never left this area, and this is probably the only place that she's ever known and had ever seen. So I think what she would be most proud of is my travels, and the fact that I've been past this area and I've seen a lot of the world. At this point, I've been to 30 countries, over 5 continents. I mostly travel by myself. I'm very particular about when I wake up and like when I eat, and so I just do it on my own. And so I struggled on what stories to tell you guys, because I have lots of stories. I put them into buckets and superlatives, like the best beaches, the best food, and all of that. But there are 3 stories that really stick out to me whenever people ask me where are my favorite places. And so one is one I took about 3 or 4 years ago. I was going through a really tough time, and like I always do, when I'm happy, when I'm sad, when whatever, I go online and I look at the cheapest ticket to anywhere. And I found a ridiculously cheap ticket to Israel. And I was like, wow, this is random. Like, who vacations in Israel? Isn't there conflict here? You know, I was just like, what is going on? So I was like, let me just go. They wouldn't offer plane tickets if people couldn't go, you know, if it was too unsafe. So I got on the plane and I went. And I spent a few days in Tel Aviv, had really great falafel, the best kebab of my life. I took a bus over to Jerusalem and I sat at all of the 3 holy sites. And really was at peace at all 3, and really just loved seeing people pilgrim from all over the world to these spots. I met a girl who was in the military, ended up staying out there. She got a job. She was from Alabama, where my siblings live. And so we just connected as if we were best friends forever. And so I ended up staying with her, and we went and had a spa day at the Dead Sea. I went over to the West Bank and spent time in Palestine. I walked through the capital city. I went to Yasser Arafat's grave site. I walked through a refugee camp and played soccer with the kids in the camp, got kicked in the shin by them. I visited the separation wall, which is very much like the wall that's been proposed here in this country, and seeing the effects that it had there. And in talking to people on both sides, you know, there are different narratives about what they feel and what the thoughts are on the conflict. But at the end of the day, people on both sides both wanted the same thing. They just wanted peace. They wanted a safe place for their kids to play in the streets. They wanted happiness for their families. And people were fighting for their lives for these basic human rights. The second trip that I always think about, another home for me, is Brazil. So when I was in graduate school at Howard University, there was an exchange program that I was able to be a part of, where I studied in Salvador, Brazil. And I was there for 5 months, and I was, you know, by myself, but I made some friends with some other kids who were studying abroad. And so through their program, we found some volunteer opportunities. And so we found this orphanage that was about 45 minutes from where we live. So every Sunday we would get breakfast and then get on the bus and go just hang out with the kids. And so this orphanage had about, at any given time, about 50 kids. It's an old grandmother who runs the place, and everybody in the area knows she takes in all of the kids who don't have parents or whose parents are not able to take care of them. And so we just felt like it was great to just go and hang out with them. And so these kids are labeled vulnerable and at risk and street kids. But all I saw were like kids who love to smile and go to the playground and hold my hand as we went to the beach. They would make fun of my Portuguese and how terrible it was. And love when we just treated them to ice cream. We put our money together and gave them ice cream. And I realized for them, their basic need was a need for love and affection and support. That basic need, that basic feeling of belonging to someone and having a real friend that really cared about them. And then the third trip, last year, I was laid off from my job. And like anyone who's laid off, you take your severance package and you book a one-way flight to Africa. Because I know everybody in this room would do that too. And so I had an amazing time. I saw the pyramids in Egypt. I went on safari and hung out with Maasai warriors in Kenya. I saw the most amazing, beautiful beach in Zanzibar, Tanzania. In Nigeria, I ate French fries, white rice, and plantains for 3 days because the food's too spicy. I had the best street food in Ivory Coast and Abidjan. In Senegal, just met the nicest people ever, and saw the tallest monument statue I've ever seen in my life. I had really somber moments when I visited slave castles in Ghana I visited one in Benin, which is really impactful for me because Benin, it's well known that the slaves taken from that port went through a very specific route that went to Haiti in the Dominican Republic. So like this is how I'm at the space that resulted in my grandmother's plot of land where she was there in the mountains. I think in all of those spaces, what I took from it was that in this large, huge continent that I crossed from east to west, that every country was different and every culture was different. And they totally appreciated me coming in and asking questions about their culture. And again, I was alone for a lot of it. So I ended up at kitchen tables and having dinner with just strangers, but they just loved that I came back home, as they said. You know, they welcomed me back home and was happy to share their culture with them. And in those trips, I realized that people just really want to be able to be unique in their cultures and their traditions, and want other people of different cultures, traditions, religions to just respect what they have there. And so I thought of all of this in kind of summing up what my travels mean to me. I imagine that's all my grandmother wanted for herself. That's all St. Rose wanted for her and her 16 children. She wanted peace and the sense of security and happiness for her children, like folks in Israel wanted. In Brazil, just like in Brazil, just a space of community. I mean, with 16 kids, I mean, you have to have some sort of community, right? But like just a sense of belonging and community and love and affection. And then like what I saw across Africa was just being able to have that tradition and hold it and keep it for the generations that came after. And so it's kind of what I think about when I go around the world. And it's something that I know that us as humans and mankind share amongst each other. All the billions of people in the world, we all fundamentally want those three things for us, for ourselves. And so with me, I think about, you know, when I think about St. Rose and her legacy and what she wanted for her descendants, I think my legacy, I really want to continue to travel and continue to share the stories of my travels with other people. I want to be able to, and I do that through my blog, right? And I'm trying to revamp it now, but I want to go a step further and start taking people on trips abroad with me, because it's not as scary as people think. It's not as expensive as people think. And it's made me a better person. And so I hope to be able to share that with other folks. Thank you.
What a perfect story for an organization that's trying to, or an initiative that's trying to build community, right? I thought that was really beautiful. Yeah. Thank you, Mandy.
You're welcome.
Are you up for some questions?
Sure.
Great. So you got to travel on a little sample of Emanuela's 30 countries and 5 continent travel tour. So what questions? What are you curious about?
I'm sorry? How old I am? I'm 32 years old.
A lot of miles.
They thought I was 25 all summer in Africa, so that's what I tell people.
What one place surprised you the most? You know, when you had an experience that you didn't expect to have.
Yeah.
Maybe even thought you had the opposite.
Yeah, so when I was in Togo, I was in Lomé, Togo, and so I get a lot of my travel inspiration on Instagram, right? And so I'm like, whenever people tag Togo, it's like these huts with folks with a specific tribe. And so I was like, okay, cool. I'm not even gonna stay. I'm just gonna roll through and, you know, find this tribe, take a picture for Instagram, and keep going. But Lomé was a deep water port city. It was like a real developed city. And I remember walking into my hotel and I was like, wow, like this is beautiful. It's a beautiful hotel. Ended up going to this like club down the street and just seeing like professionals all in suits and beautiful like clothing and dresses, all just networking and having a good time. And I was like, I need to stop going on Instagram. I need to stop watching the news and getting my ideas of what a country is through that. It was a pleasant surprise. think I had to okay, so one thing, people would ask me if they could come with me, and I had to overcome, like, I had a hard time saying no, because literally we wouldn't be friends if we did. I like to just wake up. Sometimes I'll land and I'll just go, and I don't even want to stop and rest. And I know a lot of people aren't like that, and so one person who traveled with me quite a bit, I had an assignment for her when she asked me to go on a trip with me, and I was like, you have to go somewhere by yourself and experience that by yourself. And she had never done it before, and she went to Puerto Rico by herself, and it was exactly what I needed her to do, because she was like, before that trip, she would have never went anywhere by herself. She was texting me during the trip, like, oh, I just met someone in this bar, we're going to another party. And like, I need people to be that kind of open-minded, because you never know who you're gonna meet and what dinner table you'll end up at. And a lot of people are very like iffy about that. And I think one thing I learned, a lot of people outside of the U.S., mostly outside of the U.S., are very welcoming and open. You know, they have open arms with folks who are from different places. And here as a culture, we're kind of standoffish, and so that would be it.
Do you speak more than one language?
So I speak Creole, Haitian Creole, fluently, is what my family, what I grew up on. I had to become fluent in Portuguese when I lived in Brazil, because all my classes were in Portuguese. I'm not that fluent anymore. It's really, but, and because of the Portuguese, I can understand Spanish a little, and because of the Creole, I can understand French pretty well.
Do you have dream destinations that you haven't reached yet?
That's a good question. I always say I want to see everywhere. I haven't been to Australia yet, so that's one of the next ones I hope to see. Before Australia, it was Singapore, Malaysia, and I just did that for my birthday. So.
What bad experience you have in one trip? You never have bad experience?
Bad experience? So I always dislike telling the bad experiences, because it could happen anywhere. So one bad experience I had was my phone was stolen in Ghana. And people kept saying, Ghana's the friendliest country in all of West Africa. And so I put my guard down and my phone was stolen. But it could happen in New York. My friend's phone was just stolen in New York off a subway. So I kind of try not to tell bad stories, because I don't want people to not want to take these trips, but it can happen anywhere. But yeah, bad things happen too.
What did you say in Africa? What did you see the poor people?
What's that?
The poor, suppose in Africa is a lot of hungers, babies, and all that stuff. What did you see in there?
Well, I think there's poverty everywhere. I think everywhere you go, here in Connecticut, there are places you go and there's poverty as well. So it's everywhere, but it's no one place that has all wealth or all poverty. People think Haiti is just like the most poor place in the world or what have you, and I go and I have a great time. So there's privilege and underprivileged areas in every place, and so.
Because sometimes in the news or in the organization, she showed the children with bones.
Yeah.
That's what they're talking about in Africa.
Yeah, and it's totally not that. There's so much more to Africa. It's just beautiful, beautiful. I don't know.
Biggest lessons of travel. I think maybe one more question. Sure.
Is there anything about New Haven, Connecticut, or the U.S. that you feel more strongly coming back from so many places?
That's a good question. I actually love living in New Haven. I think it's a very diverse city that has a lot to offer. There are a lot of people from different places that come to New Haven for various reasons, for Yale or what have you. But I just love that there are folks who come from other countries and I can talk to them about that, and I can, if I haven't been to their country yet, I have them tell me all about it so I can go. But I think New Haven's one of the few cities in America that really has that kind of worldly diversity, and I love it. That's why I've settled here.
We're thrilled to have you as a member of our community.